going to be Esther.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm glad. Honestly, I thought you were going to pick on me.
What's that?
I'm just going to text a couple of people to see what
Okay.
like Katie and Tim.
Who's that?
Katie and Tim.
Okay.
So they're coming around in a couple of minutes.
Is it Kerry or Tim? Okay. Oh, Tim Shaw.
Yeah.
How long do I have, Rich? So where are people coming? Okay, guys. I think we're going to get ourselves on the go and get this night off to a start. So, welcome to Tearfund Story Sessions. Welcome to those that could have joined us. I'm sure there'll be a trickle of people coming through. But this is the first Tearfund Story Sessions that we're running, and you'll hear in the background. So it's authentic. It's not just sounds that we're making. It's a real coffee shop. But yeah, we're running this to really create a platform for people that have stories that have been away, but also those that are just interested in development and interested in volunteering and want to hear a little bit about what's happening. So we've got you guys obviously in the shop, and then we've got people that are streaming. So if those that are out there that are watching on YouTube, if you guys want to tweet any questions on Facebook or Twitter, please do, and then we're going to answer those as we go. But it's really just going to be an opportunity for us to start a conversation. That's really the heart of it. We want to get people to talk about what's happened to them, what are they doing now, but it is a conversation. So please do feel free as we are talking just to interrupt. We really are just a community here, just wanting to hear each other's stories. So I'm going to ask Esther to be the first one to take the stage. Esther, please come and take your seat on the far more comfortable chair than mine. Perfect. You got a hand, you got a clap. That's pretty impressive. So as the first person telling their story on Tearfund Story Sessions, this is quite a momentous occasion. Do you feel the weight of sitting in that chair? No.
I feel a lot of pressure right now.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Well, we'll hopefully relieve it by maybe laughing sort of just every now and then, just to make you feel a little bit more comfortable. But Esther, maybe let's just start off just giving us a bit of a picture of where did you go? What happened? Why did you go? And just giving people here and the people online just a bit of an idea. So go for it.
So I'm Esther. Originally, I'm from Plymouth in the southwest of England, and I suppose the reason that I went away with Tearfund was because when I was about 15 or 16, God really broke my heart for human trafficking. So I found out that there was like 27 million people like that had been forced into slavery around the world today, and I just knew that it wasn't okay, and I was always looking for ways, whilst I was still at school, that I could like try and do my bit to help end human trafficking. So I was always looking for like petitions online and for where I could like donate money or like do a fundraiser to get money to these charities that were already doing a lot of work. And I was just always like really hungry to do more and more. Like I was writing letters to the children in like the safe houses and stuff to just really try and make use of all my time to try and do these different things. So and it was something that I was really passionate about as well. I was always like trying to learn more facts and like find out newspaper articles and stuff. But there was always part of me that wanted to go and see it firsthand and go and like meet people who had experienced it, so that I could like put faces to all the statistics that I was reading, because it was really hard to like see all these big numbers and actually remember that each person was an individual and that they had like their own feelings and their own personalities and stories to tell. So I was like desperately looking for places to go for like a gap year or whatever, to go and meet people who had experienced it, and as well like to see what the charities were actually doing firsthand, because I knew that I wanted to like use my life to help end trafficking or to do my part with that. But I didn't want to like, I wanted to see how other people were going about that rather than just I don't know, using the internet to find out how it was possible. Like I wanted to see what people were doing practically. And so I looked at going to a few different safe houses, but nothing really worked out. And then Tearfund offered a trip to Cambodia to work with CHO, the Cambodian Hope Organisation, who work to like prevent human trafficking.
So on that note there, because I think a lot of people when they speak about trafficking, it's quite a sensational topic. And I think up until this point, you've obviously been a part of some fundraising efforts and everything like that. But you were confronted with this charity. Their primary role was preventing trafficking. What was your first response coming from a Western understanding of trafficking to kind of how was that experience?
So like when I first got there, I was actually quite disappointed because they had this school called Safe Haven School, which had originally been a safe house where they rescued children out of trafficking. And in like a really Western point of view, like I got there, I was like, no, like I want to tell people that I've been able to help out at this safe haven where they've got all these rescued children. And it was like just a school for children who were vulnerable, rather than ones who had been rescued. And like at the start I was, like I said, I was really disappointed, but then like I learned about how much more important it is to prevent human trafficking rather than to rescue the children, because otherwise if you don't prevent it, you just have more children to rescue. So and all of CHO's projects which we got involved with were about like going into villages where children were really vulnerable and educating them and their parents about the risk of human trafficking, and then teaching them how they can avoid it, so that then they don't even have to go through the traumatizing experience.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, so in terms of your time there in CHO, what would be, how would you summarize, the experience, and because we're obviously going to get to what you're doing right now, which is really exciting, but what was the thing that really you took away from your time at CHO?
I think the main thing that I learned whilst being there was like how creative you can be about ending human trafficking, and like with all the development work that's going on, like they were doing so many different things to help prevent it, like providing training in like hairdressing and stuff like that to give these women jobs, or like to help them set up their own businesses, so that then their children could go to school, because a lot of the reasons why the children weren't being trafficked was because they didn't have any education or weren't going to school. So then they could afford to send them there, and that would like prevent the issue in that way. Or they had like other businesses like motorbikes and stuff like that, like fixing motorbikes, and they had a cafe where they trained people up as well and raised money through that, loads of different microloans. And I just think that, they had really opened their eyes to the potential that these people had, rather than saying, this is what you don't have, so we're going to give it to you. They were sort of saying like, these are the skills that you do have, let us help you improve them, and then so that you can do it by yourself. So it was more like giving people a hand up out of poverty, rather than like literally picking them up and like throwing them. Do you know what I mean? Because it just really wasn't patronising. It was really empowering.
And that's so important, as you start to look at development and bad development models, you see people, really trying to, come in as superheroes, and trying and getting people out, and obviously in the short term, doing some good, but ultimately that actually ending up hurting the people in the community that they're in. So I wonder, just from the audience side, are there any questions around Esther's experience? Because we're going to head on to a time with being back and everything like that, but just around trafficking, and maybe that might have arisen, that you guys might have. So yes, Joe.
Can you give us one person's story that someone you met out there, a child or other, that really impacted you?
That's so hard. There's so many. Like, I'm being put on the spot now. Like, there were just some of the women that worked in the cafe that we had worked with. They had been in Actually, I'm going to change my story now. Sorry.
You can do
Is
that.
that okay?
It's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Okay, this is live, people. And then, so there was this one boy who worked in the cafe called Sokko, and we got to know him so well, and he always had like this beaming smile on his face, and he was always like so friendly, and his English was amazing, and he was always so keen to learn. And then as we got to know him, we found out a bit more about his backstory. And like, he had been in the safe haven school when it was a safe haven. So him and his sister had been rescued, we're not sure what from, but brought into this school and been really invested in. But then the school was only up to grade 7, so they couldn't, as he got older, they just couldn't provide for his educational needs. And so what Cho did was they brought him into the offices where we lived at the time as well, and so they gave him a place to live, but also gave him a job working down in the cafe, which meant that they said that if he worked for them there, then they would pay for his schooling to go to a school nearby. So then he was able to be educated up through that, and now he's even visiting the university nearby as well on the weekends, and able to get a degree in like management and something to do with, I think it was accounting as well, but that Cho were paying for through, and then they provided him with a job and a place to stay as well.
That's incredible.
So which would obviously totally change his life, and then it gave him so many opportunities where he wouldn't have had education before, but they've really brought him up. And
it's this whole idea of human flourishing, how do we actually get people to flourish? It's really, really exciting. Anybody else from the stage floor or else out there on the internet, please do get involved. If there's any, cool. Let's join, or let's go on to kind of what's happening now, because I think you're at this transition stage at the moment, about to take off somewhere, and you can explain more of that. But just give us a bit of an understanding. You landed back from your experience, and what was kind of the thought process as you kind of moved on?
So when I got back to England, I started working straight away because I thought I was going to go abroad again. But then and I wanted to work with like vulnerable women again. I was really I'm so keen to learn about like how people are like trying to tackle like the end of human trafficking and like development of like these vulnerable women when they come out of like prostitution and stuff. So I looked to work in different places, like either at like getting girls out of the brothels or at the stage after, like about integrating them back into society. So and I looked for loads of opportunities, but they all fell through.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going to university, which is where I am now, at Sussex, studying anthropology and cultural studies.
Okay. Wow.
And so so I was like really frustrated actually at the fact that I was just going to be studying.
Yeah.
And so when I got to Brighton, I looked for like loads of different ways that I could like try and get involved with some work with like vulnerable adults as well. So I ended up getting involved with a church in Brighton called St. Peter's, and I was doing some work with them like 1 or 2 days a week with the homeless people in Brighton.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they do loads of outreach to like vulnerable women and men, and like put on a big meal for them on a Saturday night and just bring them all in and build up relationships and try and like restore the poverty in the different ways, so like spiritually and materially, by providing like prayer and like food and shelter and stuff. And then I like was so desperate to learn about other work that they've done, so I got involved with their night shelter as well.
Okay.
So I was like constantly trying to see what people are doing to just like really teach people their value as well. I think that's a really big thing about like especially people who are homeless or have been in prostitution and stuff. They just don't know their true value and how much God loves them and how much they're worth. So I've just been like really trying to get my feet, like my hands and feet involved in these different ministries to try and like learn from what works best and stuff like that.
I think it's really interesting that you say how your experience, with going to Cho and kind of understanding what development looks like, both in the developing world as well as obviously the developed world, which is here in the UK, and just seeing how St. Peter's in Brighton, is really just using some of the same model, in empowering people. So that's really cool. That's how that works out.
Yeah, like helping people realise what they're good at and then like trying to encourage them in that. Yeah, rather than just giving them aid, throwing things at them and running away.
Yeah. Definitely. And so tell me now, June, you're setting off to San Francisco in June. Really exciting. What is happening there? What are you up to in San Francisco?
So San Francisco was where I wanted to go for the full year, but it didn't really work out. And they're like an amazing ministry called San Francisco City Impact. And they like do they just open up their building like every day in the morning and the evening, where all like the homeless people in the Tenderloin district, which is the poorest district in San Francisco, can come in and just get free breakfast and a free evening meal. And they put on like a service every day as well with like worship and a short talk and prayer. But then they also do like really cool things where they have it's like a little doctor's surgery there, where doctors volunteer to give up a day a week or something, and they just open it up to the neediest people in San Francisco. And one day it might be like a dentist place, or one day it might be like looking at feet, and then so that those who can't afford insurance and medical attention in San Francisco can come there and get free medical care. And they have loads of, like some businesses as well, where they try and like employ the homeless people and get them some experience in their businesses, so that then they can go on and get a better job or get like life experience, and then finally be employed like in a solid, sustainable job. So and I think when I go out there, I'm hoping to do some work with the women in the brothels around as well.
Okay.
And I think they want to set up like a Bible study and stuff, and just bring like, and a place where the women can just come and be themselves, so that they can build up relationships with those women in the brothels and start teaching them about their worth.
Yeah. So I mean, you've had quite an extensive experience, when it comes to volunteering and putting yourself out there. But I know that I think a lot of people, there's this kind of controversial topic sort of nowadays, sort of around development work, that's got to do with kind of voluntourism and kind of the effect that can have. So I thought it would be interesting just from your side. I know that you've been doing some of this stuff at university, but I think what is what is bad volunteer practice and what you've kind of grappled with.
Like, I think we were talking about this earlier about how, I suppose, like, if you go abroad and you think, like, oh, we're like the supreme West, like, we're better than all these developing countries and the people living there. Like, we'll go there, we'll show them how to do their ministry, like, this is what works for us. So it'll definitely work in their, like, country, that's what they're doing wrong. And, like, try and pick them up on that, then you're definitely just going to fall flat on your face.
Yeah.
Or, like, it'll work for a few days, and then you'll go back home, and then you're just going to leave damage behind rather than, like, a positive impact. Whereas I think, like, the attitude that, like, I had when I went out there was more like, I really want to learn. Like, even if I did have, like, a bit of the, like, Western supreme view, like, I really did want to go out there and see what the charity was already doing to help end human trafficking, and see, like, where they needed help and, like, get involved with that and do what they wanted me to do. And I think a lot of the danger is when you go out there with that perspective of you're going to fix everything, whereas we should just go out there with the expectation to learn from them, and, like, that's where we'll be able to help. And then as well you get to experience the real culture and, like, hear people's stories, and it will change you more, I think.
Definitely. And I mean, if, you know, looking at the audience and those guys that are out there and have a passion, you know, have got this draw in terms of the social justice issue, like trafficking, you know, what kind of advice would you give them, you know, to start out? Because I think it's very easy just to get involved in awareness, but a lot of people really want to get their hands dirty. And so what advice would you give to our audience and those that are watching on how to get involved?
I think definitely, like, Google charities that are locally working in that area and really see what you can do at home, like whether it's, like, fundraising for that charity or going along, like, shadowing people, or even just going along and, like, offering to wash up for them so that you can see from, like, behind the scenes and just really support them from that way, or just, like, really look for ways that you can get involved. And don't just send an email, like, ring them up as well, because, like, emails can just, like, go through in and out of an inbox and probably get deleted, whereas, like, if you ring them up, you can really tell them about where your heart is and, like, how you want to serve and how you want to get involved. And, like, I do just think it's all about, like, learning, like seeing what you can learn from these charities and seeing what you can, like, how you can develop yourself and what you think about the issue as well through that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, any last questions or things that the audience want to ask Esther before she goes? Tom, go for it.
Sort of on a trip to Cambodia, when you came back to the UK, was there anything in particular that affected you that you weren't expecting to?
So was anything that you experienced that affected you that you weren't expecting? If there's anybody online that didn't hear that.
One of the things that's it's a bit like cliche culture shock, but, like, was definitely, like, one of the minor things was the, like, the modesty of clothing. So when I got back to England, the day after I was supposed to go to a wedding, and I came back and I'd been used to wearing, like, trousers, like, long trousers and, like, long sleeve tops. And then I'd bought this dress before going away to wear to this wedding, so that I knew it was there when I came back. And I, like, was getting really excited for it. And then I put the dress on, like, on the day of the wedding, and I literally just cried. And I said, I can't go out in public wearing this. And then so I just didn't go to the wedding. I'm a really bad friend.
Hopefully she's not watching. No, she knows that
I told her I was ill. No, I'm joking. So that was one of the minor things. And then I think, like, more like subtly that's shocked me since I've come back is, like, is actually the whole, like, volunteerism thing. Like, just, like, being aware that, like, these trips that people do, like, we're not going abroad to save the world, but we're actually, like, going abroad to change us and to learn from the people that we go and meet and stuff like that. And then I think another thing that I found really frustrating is just like other people's apathy
Yeah.
and just like come on, like when I'm talking about stuff and getting like really heated and like
Yeah.
like you've got to get involved in this or this or this, and just other people just turn around and just like looking at you blankly and listening to you but not really listening.
Yeah.
I found that really hard.
Yeah.
You probably did as well.
We'll find out from Tom later about his experience, and just I think the apathy of the West is something that is is quite difficult to take, especially when you've been so rocked, you know, with the experience of going and seeing that. But
or people thinking it's cute. Oh,
yeah,
just
that's
like
so cute.
just
yeah.
like I'll be telling them about, oh, it's so cute that you went to Cambodia and helped people.
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
Yeah.
please stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Esther,
Thank
for
you.
coming and sharing your story. If there's any questions that are coming from the Twitter feed, we'll probably get you back on at the end. If people are a bit delayed, really trying to kind of grapple with some of the stuff that you've spoken about. But thank you so much. Round of applause for Peter Grant. If you could come up and take a seat on the comfy spot. You've got your coffee. That's good. What do you think about the coffee? Is it good?
It's good coffee.
Good.
It's
Okay.
quality. Yeah, it's nice.
Well, it's Husk Coffee who's doing the hosting of this. They basically allowed us to use their cool coffee shop in the East End of London. So Pete, so I think you've obviously come with a bit of a different experience in the sense that Esther went away for 6 months. You were away in Zambia for a little bit of a shorter time. But maybe just give us a bit of a feel of how your time over in Zambia was, you know, just so that people know kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I'm Pete. I'm a Londoner. I work in an advertising agency, and I took 2 weeks of annual leave to go to Zambia with Tearfund, which was great. And we went to a project called JCM, which is set up by a Zambian woman called Godfrida. And basically her story was she was a bank manager. She was really high up in a bank in Zambia, so kind of incredibly wealthy, successful, powerful woman. And her story was that she would go to work every day, and on her way to work she would see kids living on the street because of HIV and poverty. There's lots of orphan kids living on the street in that country.
Yeah.
And she, one day on her way to work, met one of these kids, and it broke her heart, and she said, kind of, I have to do something.
Yeah.
So when she got home, she bought a bathtub, and she just invited like as many kids as possible, and she gave them a bath.
Yeah.
And she started doing that once a week.
Yeah.
And then she was like, I can't just give them a bath, so she started cooking them dinner,
Yeah.
kind of once a week, when she got home. And eventually it kind of snowballed, and she bought a house and turned it into kind of like a respite centre / orphanage for kind of as many of these kids to live in as possible. And then she was kind of working half in as this bank manager, but she'd like sold her BMW and bought a minibus so that she could kind of provide for the kids in her spare time and kind of bus them around. And then eventually she kind of left her job and became the CEO of this kind of charity. And now it's kind of got centres all across Zambia. It's working with hundreds of kids, also empowering women in groups across the whole country. And now it's kind of got to the point where it's so big that the government are saying, can you take all these kids? Because we've kind of got them. So I went just to kind of visit that project with a friend from my church and also another guy. So the three of us just went for 2 weeks to kind of see what they're all about. And it was great.
And I mean, how was that? I mean, coming from, you know, being in London, living in London, to all of a sudden being, you know, smack bang in Zambia, what were some of the things that you had to grapple with as you know, obviously you just spent 2 weeks there, but even that 2 weeks, you know, describe to us, you know, that are listening here, kind of what that was like.
So I think the West gets quite a funny, kind of distorted view of Africa through the media and various other things. So I had a certain image of my mind on what I thought Zambia would be like. And it really wasn't. So kind of me and my friend sort of naively assumed that we'd sort of be slumming it, but actually we were in Lusaka, so in the capital, and kind of on the street where we lived there was a shopping centre, and we went to Subway for lunch every day. We went to Nando's in the evening. We went to the cinema on the weekend. So in that respect, there were some things that were really familiar. Got our money from a Barclays cash machine and the whole thing. But at the same time, the street kids' home was down the road, and they'd never been able to go to the cinema, obviously, on the street where they lived. And kind of one of the women that we worked with kind of said, "Oh, we've been to Subway for our lunch," and she was like, "That sandwich is like my month's wage."
Wow.
So I suppose it was kind of a weird experience of things being quite familiar, but also seeing really big kind of inequalities. And part of me went, how can you live in a country where there's such big inequality? And then I realised I live in a country with big inequality, and it kind of doesn't. I walk past it every day as well, but it's just because I was kind of an outsider going into a new country. That kind of really struck me.
That's interesting that you speak about that in the sense of it being almost like we've this thing called factory blindness. How I speak about in when you're working in kind of production, where you literally need to go to another factory in order to just get a fresh set of eyes. Because often you'll walk past a problem day in and day out at a factory, and it literally is something that people actually have to deal with. And it's almost like in the West we become when we see inequality. On the other side of the world, we almost have to go in order to see, in order to almost shake ourselves out of, what maybe what Esther spoke about in terms of this apathy. And so, would you say that? I mean, in terms of your church background and stuff like that, did you find that from being a Christian in the UK and how did that what was that experience like in terms of seeing Christianity in a different culture? And how that kind of outplayed.
I suppose what was great is so the project that we went to kind of had Isaiah 61 as their kind of like motto that they always use. So they were kind of filled with the Holy Spirit, and the way they lived that out was really practical. So it was spreading the good news to the poor, comforting the people who mourn, just everything about their whole life was kind of practically showing people the kingdom of God, giving them food, giving them comfort, showing them their worth. And I suppose it kind of shook me up to how comfortable church is sometimes in the UK. So the project that we went to, a lot of the kind of food for the street kids comes from just kind of families once a month buying big bags of food and giving it to them, and that kind of becoming part of the rhythm of kind of their lives as a Christian. And it kind of made me realise in the UK, what am I doing? I'm not putting a portion of my income aside to buy food for people who are kind of in need. So I suppose the Christians that I met in Zambia living out their faith practically by serving the poor was a massive part of their faith, which was really inspiring.
So you almost feel like in the UK we've almost compartmentalized looking after the poor in the community, and therefore there's almost like an addition, something that you can do if you choose to. Whereas in Zambia, it's just something that is just so a part of their kind of living and breathing.
Exactly.
Wow. Anybody in the audience that has a question for Pete, that's either been to Africa or something that maybe affected you? If there's any questions that you guys might have. Alex in the back, in the comfy sofa.
How has your time in Zambia, how you live in the UK now, any practical?
So I'll just repeat it for those that are out there. So has your time in Zambia sort of shaped how you outlive your time in the UK, being back kind of practically?
Definitely. So I was really inspired by Godfreyda. and how she saw a need in her kind of daily routine,
Yeah.
and then did something really practical to kind of solve it.
Yeah.
And when I came back to the UK, okay, there aren't street kids
Yeah.
in Finchley, where I live. But one of the things that me and a friend noticed practically in our church was, because it's a very international community, we
Yeah.
have lots of people who've just arrived in the UK
Yeah.
who don't speak English.
Yeah.
And also my gran kind of came to the country 50 years ago and she didn't speak any English, and kind of from speaking to her and from speaking to them,
Yeah.
they were saying like how isolating it is
Wow.
if you arrive in England and kind of don't speak English. It's hard to make friends, it's hard to sort out your rent.
Yeah.
And so me and my friend, because we both taught English,
Yeah.
we were like, okay, that is something really practical that we could do for free
Yeah.
as a kind of community service.
Wow.
So me and my friend have set up like a free conversation class,
Okay.
and we put it on Gumtree.
Oh yeah.
And so that's been going a year now. Some
Wow.
kind of Zambia, and we've had maybe like 150 people
Jeez.
like come through the
That is
doors.
Crazy.
And yeah, it's really great, and it's kind of to be honest, it's not like a huge amount of
Yeah.
effort, because I just rock up in a coffee shop and speak English,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is, I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess it's kind of the same as Godfrida. She saw kind of a need,
Yeah.
and she found like a really practical way that she could solve it, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what we did in our church
That's incredible.
afterwards. So that's been great.
And I mean, how have you found the church as a whole? You know, has it almost shaken them up a little bit? You know, in terms of seeing something like this, has it almost been quite catalytic in terms of your
Yeah.
friends and
Yeah, it's. I mean, I go to a great church, and they're kind of quite
yeah,
active, and there's kind of lots of quite similar projects like that anyway. But
Amazing.
yeah, certainly lots of people from church have got involved, and
Awesome.
that's been really great.
That's so good. It's so simple, you know, but actually it's those simple ideas that are, you know, the most effective and,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
work the best. So that's really great. So again, I think that was a great question there from Alex. Anything else that you maybe kind of picked up on? Any questions from the floor? Twiddling your thumbs. I think there's so much to be said when you take an experience like, you know, 2 weeks in Zambia, and to see how, you know, no matter what the length of time, if you see the experience in light of life rather than just being an experience, how powerful that can actually be. Because I think often you see so many people almost a demand and supply sort of type thing, where they're like, I just want to go and, you know, get a photo with a black baby, you know, for my profile picture, you know, and that'll be a good experience, and I can say that I did something. And it's really a sense of pride, you know, feeling like you've done something. But it's something different when you actually go to what Esther was speaking about earlier, about really just coming alongside and really listening to their story, which you did, you know, and listening to Godfrey in terms of her, you know, how she worked it out.
Yeah.
So it's really powerful that.
Yeah, I was going to say I feel exactly the same way as Esther. That kind of, if we'd gone over and been like, we're going to save the day, we're going to make such a big difference, actually no one would have taken anything out of it, because we wouldn't have learned anything. And, you know, practically in 2 weeks, I'm not going to solve the street kid problem in Zambia. But yeah, I think if you go with kind of a healthy dose of humility and a massive kind of portion of curiosity, and kind of go and say, you know, you teach me about what you do and how you live, then it's really powerful and really, really great.
And also, I mean, I think because you've got quite an interesting job, which I would really like to chat about in a moment. But like, obviously, you already had quite a heart for social justice, a heart for the poor already. But I mean, how has that outworked itself now, kind of in your job? Because did you start your job after you got back, or were you already in?
I was already doing that.
Okay. Cool.
So I work in an advertising agency that helps charities and not-for-profits communicate.
Yeah.
So that was a massive part of why I wanted to go, because we were kind of talking about poverty and fundraising,
Yeah.
you know, every day.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like I can't do this unless I kind of see it firsthand.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I thought what was really great is that I suppose like with charity fundraising, there's a kind of preconception that it's just a huge organisation rocking up
Yeah.
and handing out food.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does happen, and it's not always the right way of doing it. But what I really liked about Tearfund and the project that we visited is it was a project that a Zambian woman herself had started because she knew how her community worked, and and then Tearfund kind of supported her practically in kind of the ways that she needed. So that was great. So yeah, when we were there, we met a guy who ran community projects in really rural Zambia, helping women form groups where they could work together to sell products, to make a bit of money, to become economically independent. And I think Tearfund, I think this is right, they bought him a bicycle.
Oh wow.
And basically it just meant that he could get to all these different projects really quickly. And it was exactly what he needed, and it just made his work so much more efficient. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what it should how it should be. And that was great.
That's amazing. And so tell me, I mean, so for those guys that are listening here and watching online, like what, you know, looking at what you guys did in terms of the conversational English, you know, how do people, or you know, what kind of tips or advice can you give to people who want to just get involved in their community? You know, like how did you go about it? And yeah, just it would be really interesting to hear from your side.
So the things that we did was pray about it a lot. And it sounds funny, but I feel like God gave us that idea rather than us coming up with it. Also, not doing it on your own. So there was 3 of us who all kind of had the same vision, and we were like, right, the 3 of us are gonna set up together, and that was really easy. And then testing the water, like in little practical steps. So we were like, okay, we're gonna try a few weeks meeting in a cafe because there's kind of no overhead costs. So it was kind of like achievable, and then we try kind of new things all the time, and if it doesn't work, then we try something different. And not kind of, we didn't start with a huge vision. We were just like, let's just do like one little thing and see if it works. And that was that's what we did.
That's really good. And I mean, in terms of how, I mean, any support or any ways in which, you know, people out there, or you know, wanting to start their own, you know, I mean, are there any things that they can, any resources or stuff that you kind of came across, you know, that was really helpful? If there's none that you can think of right now, we can always just put it on the Facebook page a little bit later.
Yeah, none comes to mind, but I can put it on the Facebook page.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, before we say goodbye to Pete, are there any last points or anything that anybody wants to say? Again, Alex, she's got a few. Go for it.
I think a lot of people, myself included, in terms of looking at going, like you said, using annual leave, find it an amazing trip like this.
I kind of think that it's the best way to see a country. So you know, I could have gone for 2 weeks traveling around Zambia anyway, and that would have been great because it's a beautiful country. But instead, because we were, you know, living with Zambians and they were cooking for us and telling us about their culture, and I kind of think it's the best kind of holiday because you're kind of immersed in a culture and with the people who actually live there. So for me, it's better than a 2-week trip on your own.
It's interesting you bring that up, and I'm glad that question got asked, because we were at a pre-departure training a few weeks ago, and one of the guys there, he might actually be watching online, but he basically just said, you know, I'm ruined for holidays. You know, like I can't actually, you know, take holidays anymore because they just feel empty. You know, in terms of it just being an experience, but you know, there's something about change and putting yourself in that position that costs you something, and just the reward, you know, that it is, and just spending time with people, you know, outside of, and like you said, not on a, not on a beach, but actually with people, and not just seeing monuments or sites, but really engaging with other people's stories. I think that's really profound. So, Pete, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Round of applause for Pete. We're gonna actually take about a 2-minute break just for everybody to replenish their stocks of coffee, and for those that are watching from home, just to have a little bit of time there. But when we come back, we're going to be hearing from Tom Lewis. So we're literally going from Cambodia to Africa to Peru, and then we're going to do something really interesting at the end, and I'll introduce that person. But 2 minutes, and then we'll be back on the seats. So see you in 2. Are you ready, bro?
Always be.
Do you want a break?
Let's see coffee.
Which one do you want?
No, I'm ready. Yeah. You want a big glass or a
Go for a little.
little?
Little.
Am I sitting here? Or am I
You
sitting
can, yeah, you can sit there and
And then
I'll
you-
call
and
you.
then you call me.
I'll usher you in.
Are we sitting there like boiling my coffee? I'll burn my time on
On
TV.
live. Yeah.
What are you drinking next one? Is it
American.
straight, no milk?
No.
Or any sugar?
No.
You're are you a coffee person? What's your favourite?
Yeah, I should know. I went to Peru.
Yeah.
But feels like I'm a coffee person. I'm not a coffee snob.
That's good.
Whereas my cousin, she's Australian. She came over not so long ago. In Vegas. And you can't go anywhere without her
Critiquing.
critiquing every coffee.
Yeah.
I'm just like it tastes good.
Yeah.
But there's a really nice coffee house in Nelson.
Yeah.
It's called the Coffee House. It's really nice.
That's
It's
what it
got like
says.
membership card and everything. You gave me so you're covered it quite a lot.
Sorry.
But yeah, just different beans.
Have you been to, because I never got to go here, but that crazy burger place in Mexico does all the crazy burgers. Yes.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
That's the one.
Andy's Burger Shop.
That's the
Really
one.
good.
What have you had? Like,
I've only been once.
do you remember the burger?
No, I'm
You
going
went
to
with
say
that. It's
but
good. I know.
but
You
it's
feel
really
good.
good, like really amazing burgers. But we arrived there.
Alrighty then, we are gonna begin again. Tearfund Story Sessions. If you guys have just joined us, this is kind of the second part to the story sessions. And for those that are here, we're going to be hearing from Tom Lewis about his time in Peru. So Tom, if you could come and take a seat. Round of applause for you, sir.
Thank you. Oh, that's a comfy chair.
Yeah, that is a comfy chair. So this is,
I'm going to put this here because
yeah, please do, yeah. I mean, you can use our makeshift table that's made out of suitcases. It's not that stable.
yeah.
But great to have you with us, Tom. Thank you that you've
Thanks.
taken this trip down from Nottingham.
Well, sort of, yeah.
Sort of, kind of. But Tom, it would really just be interesting for the guys that are here and the guys that are viewing online. You know, you went to Peru. You know, you went and spent some time out for 6 months, so you went for a longer time. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about your time in Peru. I know you had your partner in crime, Robbie Smart, with you, which unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. But yeah, give us a bit of a picture of what happened in Peru.
What happened in Peru? A lot happened in Peru. So I always knew I wanted to go on a gap year because my brother did.
So it's generational.
So it was like as soon as he went on one, he came back and he went to Lidl barefoot, and I was like, oh, that's I want to be like that. And so yeah, I always wanted to go on a gap year, and I don't know. I just sort of applied to Tearfund. My dad has been involved with Tearfund for a while, I think, and he sort of pointed them out to me. So I was like, okay, sweet. Looked at all the options, and I was like, oh man, there's so many cool places to go. I don't know why I picked Peru. People ask me why Peru. I was sort of, I don't know. I liked the idea of going to South America.
Yeah.
So like I applied, I went to the interview, blabbed my way through that, and next thing you know, I'm at Heathrow Airport with 5 strangers, and we're on our way. Yeah, it was an amazing experience, really.
What do you think for you going as like because I mean you're what about 20 now, 21?
20, yeah.
20, and I mean so you went kind of. Had you travelled much, quite extensively before, or?
And not really, no. people would assume so. Like, my mum's Australian,
Yeah.
but we don't really get to go there much as a quite a big family. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
expensive. But no, not really. I'm not very well travelled, to be
Yeah.
honest. So I've always loved the idea of it.
Yeah.
I never sort of thought I would ever like miss home at all. Like I
Yeah.
was just always like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
And so it was always just exciting. For
Yeah.
me, really. So it was new, but also it wasn't sort of daunting
Okay.
in a way.
But I mean,
yeah.
you are one of those kind of adventurous types, so you do
Yeah, I
like
reckon.
an adventure.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
we can
yeah.
talk a little bit later about what you did after your time in Peru, but
Yeah.
but I think there's something growing. But I think we'll leave that a little bit later. But
Okay.
so your time in Peru, what did you guys get up to? I know there was a lot of football involved.
Yeah.
But what did you actually do while you were out there with a partner?
Yeah, so we worked for a partner charity called Warmers, and they do a selection of things. They're a really, really good charity, and they obviously work through sort of local churches in the city that they're based in, called Cajamarca. There's quite a few churches there, and they work through the majority of them, as many as they can, and just sort of spiritually helping them, financially helping them. They also work through agricultural groups and sort of communities in the countryside. Cajamarca is an amazing place because you've got the city, and it's an awesome city, and you can just walk out to the countryside pretty much.
Wow.
5 minute
Yeah.
5 minute car journey, and you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And so the countryside is easily accessible.
Yeah.
So they work with all these different agricultural groups, and they also work through schools. And one of their missions is to empower women. So women, I think on paper they've got pretty similar rights, but
Yeah.
socially they're definitely
Wow.
lesser
Yeah.
as a collective. So like their mission as Warmers was to sort of empower them,
Wow.
and they did that through loads of different things. They so character building type exercises, maths teaching, and just a process. So for specifically, they could teach them how to sort of make something
Okay.
in one session, and they'd give them the materials to go away, make it themselves, come back, they'd show off whatever they've made.
Yeah.
So let's say they've made a skirt or something,
Yeah,
they show it off, and then they'd put them through the system of going and selling them in the market.
Okay.
And so that sort of whole experience builds their character, builds their confidence,
Yeah.
and also gives them money, because
Yeah.
everything that they make from what they've sold, they get themselves. So, and they get the materials to keep doing it.
Okay.
So that's just one example of how they
And
do
I
that.
mean, for you as a guy from the UK, you probably had you grappled with kind of this idea of gender inequality much, or was it at the forefront of your mind? Was it quite something that kind of shocked you that this was actually happening?
I mean, you can't really avoid feminists,
Yeah.
can you? They're everywhere, and
we'll get a few comments about that.
yeah. I'm trying to be controversial. I mean, gender inequality is something that's huge for everyone, and it affects everyone, and it definitely needs to be highlighted.
Yeah.
And I think in this culture it is, and it is continually being more and more talked about and
Yeah.
discussed, and is part of sort of society now, and
Yeah.
and so I think I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't sort of on my mind.
Yeah.
Because it's everywhere. It's
Yeah.
sort of unavoidable.
Yeah.
But I'd never really been in a society where it was noticeably unequal.
Yeah.
So yeah, I suppose in the UK it's less. It's
Yeah.
more subtle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's definitely there.
Yeah.
But in Peru, in some places it's just more obvious.
Yeah.
So easier to see.
Yeah.
And so that was almost shocking in a way.
Yeah. And so, I mean, your Peruvian experience. I mean, what kind of were the things that coming back to the UK, the time out there. What really, what really struck you? What was shifting and shaping for you? So you mentioned that seeing the inequality. What other things really shook you?
I think whilst being out in Peru, similar to Peter, in that we sort of got there expecting to be in a really poor environment and a really sort of third world sort of stereotypical area. But actually you arrive and similarly we had sort of Pizza Hut, I think it was Pizza Hut, or and just like fast food restaurants and that sort of thing, and a big mall just down the road. Taxis were easy to get there. And when we first went there, you know, we got our cash out from the cash machine, and we're just like, what's different? You know, walking around the mall, a couple of guys are like, oh man, I'm gonna have pizza every day. And we're like, no, you can't do that. But you know, it's in some ways, Western society is this huge cloud that's just like coming over. I know they're sort of more West than us, but coming over into these sort of more developing countries that have less money, and so there's that bigger contrast.
That's really interesting.
So like you've got these big malls that are just like slammed into the middle of the city, but then like Pete said, we've got like crazy poverty in walkable distance, you know. And so that, you know, that was something that hit home. Took a couple of weeks to, but it definitely hit home. And I think also, and I'm sure the others would say this, just personal relationships with the people out there. When you sort of prepare to go out there, you're up for like a really amazing experience. And to be honest, if I'm honest with you, it was for very much selfish reasons. I was ready to just go out there and be taking it all and being like, it's an amazing experience. I can sort of go back and say how I did this and I did that and I got this. But actually, until you get those personal relationships with the people there, that's when you sort of change and your whole perception is flipped. You know, actually, this is real. These are real people, created by God, and actually, God loves them. I'm the same as them. And so, without being repetitive, I mean, what Esther was saying is you can't sort of just go out there and say we're going to save the world. We're going to go out there and tell them how we run, and they should run like that. It's like a mutual thing. For me, I think they helped me, if not more than I helped them. It's about sort of all being people, all being sort of people of God, created by God, all being sort of helpful to each other in a way. And so we were materialistically, we were helping them. We were sort of helping them build and paint and do all these things, you know. But actually, spiritually, we were also helping them in some ways, but they helped us so much in that way. And it helped us to take from their culture what they had and what was really, really good there and bring it to our culture. So people, that's just relationships with people, I think that was a huge thing for me.
That's amazing when you look at it and you actually just go, that simple interaction with somebody else, you know, on the other side of the world, and it really does make it that personal thing that you actually take it away, and it's something of you almost left in Peru, you know, because you've invested, you know, in a relationship rather than just being a spectator, because it's so easy just to almost have a, you know, I think how we engage with poverty so often is just through a television screen, you know, seeing that kind of that stereotypical kind of starving child or whatnot, and then when you actually are in the place having a laugh, having a football game, and those people really impact you. Really interesting. Anybody from either online or here in the audience, anybody have a question for Tom over here about Peru? Oh, okay, yes, Esther.
You mentioned about how you took the like good bits that you learned from their culture and brought it into the like culture back home. Like, how have you done that? Like, what really stood out for you of the culture in Peru that you can like try to bring back home with you?
Okay, for those online, what is it that you've seen kind of culturally in Peru that you've taken back and you've almost bottled and brought back, you know, to sort of how you live out your life here? So,
I think for me it's more of a personal thing. So many people will go out and they'll come back and start campaigns and rally people up, and I think that's amazing. I've got so much admiration for people who can just do that and and be so like proactive. But for me it was more of a a change in attitude, and like a personal change of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Which I think is a start for me to becoming that proactive person. But specifically, I think if there's one thing that really shocked me, I mean, my question to Esther was like, is there anything that you took that you weren't expecting to take?
Yeah.
And for me, I was expecting to sort of come back and be like, oh man, they're so poor, we're not.
Yeah.
And like, I've got,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, it was actually something that really stood out was consumerism and the whole Western society and the UK and just everywhere, London here, it's so like, you know, adverts everywhere, advertising what you should buy, what's good about it, and just brands everywhere. And for me specifically, I mean, I'm not very fashionable, but it was clothes.
Yeah.
Everyone sort of looks at clothes and says, oh, they base their opinion on those clothes based on like the label that's on the front.
Yeah.
I remember, and this was really weird, like I was wearing a Ralph Lauren top.
Yeah.
And it is the most boring polo t-shirt. Like, if it didn't have the Ralph Lauren thing, you know. And someone said, oh, I like your polo. and it just like, before Peru, I would have been like, oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's Ralph Lauren. But like, I didn't show it, I just sort of said thanks. But inside, I was burning. I was like, no, you only like it because it's got this little like man on a flipping horse on it. You know? That's the only reason you like it. And actually, it really annoyed me, and it like, and it just like tied a knot inside. I was like, no, that's wrong, because we're so like deluded by society. Everyone tells us, you know, our worth is in our financial worth. You know, our worth is in how much we earn and how much we can afford, and actually that's complete rubbish. Our worth is in so much more than that. And being out in Peru, you see these people, and you gain real relationships with the people that are so valuable because they are made in the image of God.
Sure.
And they're so valuable not because they're wearing certain labels and they've got nice jeans, but because they're like are loved and are cherished by God. And they got everything they need just to sort of be that. You know, they don't need to be wealthy in this sense. So it was that. You've got that sort of material poverty, but also the spiritual poverty that's so huge in the UK. And I think that's something that hit me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Anybody else? We've got two more questions. So we've got Joe. If Joe could go first.
Thanks for sharing. So you said the relationships were the thing that struck you the most, or had the biggest impact or major change. Can you tell us, I guess, like the person you met or the relationship that had the biggest impact or the biggest change, if there was one that stands out?
Yeah. So many. Do you know? I think I'll choose one that wasn't necessarily like a relationship, because there were so many relationships that I had with people, and we gained like a real loving relationship between each other. But there were so many of them, and just huge figures that will stick in my life forever. But I think, because this one stands out, I think I'll pick that. But we went to a church. It wasn't on the agenda. We just went to this church one evening. In Peru, things just don't happen by the clock. I think in most countries, in most countries that aren't Western and 2 o'clock, they just doesn't happen on time, you know. And so we thought this thing would start about 8. It started at like 11.
Wow.
And so it's this evening service pretty much at a church, and we arrive and just hordes of people are piling in. And it's just like it was almost like a garage on the side of a road, because it was just like there was no door necessarily. It was just like an open sort of garage, really, but big. And so we're walking in, like they're welcoming us in, and we've just got this one link. So someone who's sort of involved in the Warmest family, or is part of the Warmest family, and she said, "Oh, you should come to my church." So we all sort of rucked up, and they loved it. They were like, gringos. And so like they loved us coming in. They were all, you know, put us up at the front. We were like shuffled up at the front, and turns out this church is like crazy, you know, like they're worshipping they're worshipping God in ways that we just haven't experienced yet in Peru, and they're dancing and they're doing this, and so they just were undignified. They just didn't care. They were just doing it for the Lord, and it was awesome to see. Although we felt a bit uncomfortable, it was awesome to see, and it was just an amazing experience. But there was this one point in the service where this family came up, and it was in a fairly poor area, not too poor, but it was like, in comparison, it was, everywhere was walkable distance. But so just a massive mix of people, and we all sit down, and this family walks up to the front, and they're sort of being welcomed into the church as members, and they just, I don't know why, and it didn't hit anyone else but me, and I started welling up a little bit, but I just don't know why, and it was fairly deep into the trip. You could just tell they were really poor. They just didn't have any money. You know? Their clothes were just like rags, and it was like a mum and dad, and I think 3 kids, if I remember right, and the two little boys. One was probably 4 kids, because they had a little baby as well. And the eldest daughter, and they were just all like in really sort of raggy clothes. But the love that the church had for them was huge, and it just really hit me. I was like, that was a moment for me where I was like, it doesn't matter how poor they are, it doesn't matter how much money they have. God loves them because He's created them, and He loves them for who they are, and God's not subject to what society says is worth. God's not subject to money. It's something that we've created, and so it just like really stood out to me. I was like, I'm not here to like bring them money and bring them sort of out of poverty. I'm learning so much from them, because the spiritual love that they sort of received from the church was huge, and that whole family atmosphere and that family feeling was huge. That's another thing that I took from Peru, was just family was so important and is so important in Peru. And I think anyone you speak to that's been to Peru will probably say something about family because it's big. But it just really hit me. I was like, this family has nothing, yet they have everything.
In community.
Second
Second question coming from Alexia on the couch at the back.
Going back to what you were talking about Western. I think that creates a divide within the population there, having seen firsthand, like people who can afford those things that are seen as Western, which are quite often seen for whatever reason, right or wrong, as what people want. Do you think it creates more of a divide between richer and poorer, or do you think that the fact that, again, it's globalization,
That's
this is going there, does it help with the economy and helps with poverty?
That's interesting. So I'll just sum it up for the guys that are online. So just looking at kind of these Western things like malls and Pizza Hut and everything like that, does it create more of a divide with those the haves and the have-nots, those that can afford and those that cannot, or is it something just around globalization? What is really happening here? Is it just a facade that's being created? So really interested in your comments there, Tom.
I mean, there's a whole economical side of things that I didn't learn about, and I'm not an economist, so I couldn't sort of comment hugely on how it benefits society financially, and also I don't really know much about how their governments run. I know it's fairly corrupt. I know that their sort of president was in prison for a bit, so I know it's pretty corrupt, and so something in me tells me that if the economy's sort of getting money from malls and that sort of thing, it's probably not going to go to the right places after all. In terms of the divide that it may cause, I think what I saw, and it actually really saddened me, was because you've got that consumerist sort of half of things mulling over the real city
Yeah.
and the people in the city, they can all see that and they all look up to these big signs
Yeah.
and big adverts and see it as the be all and end all of life. You know,
Yeah,
that's where I want to be. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not a bad thing because it can sort of strive them to get out of where they are. But in the same way, I feel like there were times when a kid would come up to me and he would have like an Adidas top on or something,
Mm.
and he'd come up to me and he'd say, "Look, it's Adidas,"
Yeah.
and it just really hurt. And every time I'd be like, "I don't care," like
Yeah.
I don't wanna say, "Oh, cool, man," because
Yeah. You just. Yeah.
you know, and it sort of encourages them. So in some ways it just it's almost Western culture going into Peru and being like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
this is how you're supposed to be. Everyone needs things.
Yeah.
Everyone needs money
Yeah.
to be happy. And so all of you who don't have that, like this is where it's at. You know, the money's where it's at, and
Yeah.
that's what's going to bring happiness. And
Yeah.
and so sometimes I feel like maybe they'll be looking at that as the source of all
Yeah.
happiness. So I think that's some of the damage that I really saw
Mm.
in the fact that malls were being plonked in the middle of cities
Yeah.
like that. But I think it naturally it does cause a massive divide in wealth as well, and status
Mm.
and all that sort of thing. Quite often I felt like some of the more wealthier kids, sort of upper class kids,
Yeah.
wouldn't associate themselves with the poorer kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's natural. It'll happen
Yeah.
wherever you go, I think.
Yeah.
And I did see it
Yeah.
in some situations where, you know, there'd be a kid who's been brought up with money,
Mm.
and he'll or she'll not involve themselves or won't play with
Mm.
the kids who haven't,
Yeah.
because there's just that sort of status,
Yeah.
that divide in status and that sort of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it does cause huge divides, I think.
Well, yeah, I think it's been really fascinating, Tom, just hearing from you and your experience, and I'm sure just from listening here, I think just the way in which we live our lives practically. I think from what you've said, you know, just the way in which it's affected you, just in that, you know, like you said, you didn't start a campaign, you didn't do this, but you're living out your life differently, you know, in practical ways, which is really, really encouraging. So, I mean, if anything, you know, what would you say to those that are out there that are, you know, in that position where they haven't started a campaign, they haven't started a social enterprise, you know, like what would your encouragement be, you know, to people out there that are grappling with the same issues that you spoke about?
The light when you leave the room. Turn the tap off when you're brushing your teeth. Actually, things like that. You know, changing your lifestyle is something that might seem really tiny. And I remember when I was a kid, you'd have all these, environmental fanatics come into primary school and be like, "Oh, you got to turn your light out when you leave the room." You're like, "Oh, what difference does it make?" You know. But like, if you do that, as much as it does make a difference when a huge group of people does start doing that, it changes your attitude to and the way you approach things. And so the little things, you know, just everyday stuff like going shopping properly, you know. When I say that, I mean, you know, looking at where it's come from, actually understanding your food. You know, buying, like, I drink a lot of coffee, and just making sure you buy like fair trade coffee or coffee from a good source. Sometimes it might be a little bit more expensive, but just use less coffee. But just little things make such a big difference. And so for those of you out there who don't feel like they can start a campaign or, you know, do big things, you can actually do big things in changing your lifestyle.
Sure.
And as much as it changes your own lifestyle, it could have a sustaining impact on other people. And so, yeah, I think that's the little bit of advice I'd give, maybe.
Thank you. Well, Tom, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Let's give a round of applause. Brilliante. So we've come to the end. We've got one surprise in store. We've got one of our Tearfunders that's been on a bit of an adventure out in South and North America that's going to be joining us. Joe Jones, could you please come and take a seat? Round of applause for Joe. So yeah, we've got a real treat in having you here, Joe. Really appreciate you taking the time, just to firstly come and just tell us a little bit of your story, but also just to support those that are, coming and telling their stories. But I think for those that don't know, what has this last year and a half been, what happened? What did you do? I know I gave them a little bit of a taster, but what happened?
Just over a year ago, my husband Steve and I left London, left England, and flew out to Argentina, from whence we wended our way up to Alaska.
Wow.
Hitchhiking. So for 8.5 months, we went wherever the driver was going, in a generally northwards direction. And with the help of 400 different drivers or vehicles,
wow,
made our way from bottom to top.
That is insane. Wow. And I mean, because the thing is, you guys have been planning this for 2 years, right? 2-3 years, how would you say?
Yeah, it had been in the ether since 2009.
Wow.
So the idea had been out there, but we said in 2012, let's go for it, let's see if we can make it happen. So it was 2 years from that point to actually leaving to go.
That is insane. And so you guys together, I believe, wrote a book on your journey.
That's right.
Where is it at the moment? It's still in the process of being written, or is it about going through the second, third draft? I mean, what? Talk to us about the book.
So we're writing a book which is a log of our journey, and it's one of the main things that we wanted to take from the journey itself was all the stories. We've been talking about stories tonight, and that was one of our main desires, was just to meet people and hear about them. Yeah. So it's a log of our journey. It's my view and Steve's view. So that's interesting. And we wrote it while we were away, and every Sunday, we never travelled on a Sunday. We would stop wherever we were and we would find a church, and then we would find an internet cafe.
Wow.
So we would make sure we did those two things. So by the time we got home, it was written up, but we hadn't read each other's material.
Wow.
So the last 3 months have been editing. So we've done about 3 read-throughs, and now we've outsourced to our mothers to get it proofread.
Wow.
And then, so a few little projects left to do, but hopefully it'll be properly finished in the summer.
Wow. And so what's it called? What's the book called?
It's called The Rule of Thumb 2.
Okay.
The reason it's number 2 is my husband, similar trip from England to Malaysia, hitchhiking as well. That was The Rule of Thumb 1.
Okay. So
but I got involved on this one. Yeah, that's right. I'm in the sequel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, can people get hold of the book? If they, are you going to sell it on Amazon or?
Yeah, we are very lucky in that we can publish it ourselves. Steve's dad runs a printing company.
Okay.
Useful.
Yeah, very useful.
So it's likely we'll publish it ourselves, and so from the summer onwards, or whenever we get to it, it'll be out there, and it will be on Amazon and all kinds of things, I'm sure.
Cool. Well, I think similar to some of the guys that were sharing, I know that obviously you went through the expanse. I mean, a real cross section of countries. But would you be able to, if I asked you that one person or that one experience that really shook you, that really got to you in your time away, whether it be on a journey with somebody or whatnot, like what were some of the takeaways, with either a person or whatnot?
Yeah. Well, our whole journey was all about relationships, which I think is what links it to what everyone else has talked about.
Yeah.
Because, as much as theories of development are now based on the idea of relationships being mended, or just forming them in the first place.
Yeah.
And so we built so many relationships, and there are some that really stood out. And one in particular was when we were in Argentina, so just under a year ago.
Yeah.
And a family picked us up. They were on holiday themselves. They were Argentinians.
Yeah.
And we travelled with them for 10 days.
Wow.
And that wasn't the plan originally. They were just, exactly.
Yeah.
They were helping us out. But they were heading up to Bolivia. And so we did the next step with them. And then they said, well, what about tomorrow? And we said, well, where are you going? So are we. And that just is incredible. Who takes a couple that they've never met before on holiday with them? And it just summed up the incredible generosity. The things people would say to us before we went away were, aren't you scared, isn't it dangerous? Really important questions and worth being challenged on. But we wanted to show that the world is a good place, and we hear a lot of the bad, but there is so much good, and that's what we want to bring with our book, is look at all the good, look at all the examples we can show of people just being unnecessarily generous towards us. We haven't got much to give beyond ourselves being there and interested in them. That's not that tangible, and people didn't know it in advance anyway, but they would stop for us, they took us in, people invited us to stay, we would have meals with them, you know, just so many things that it was unbelievable.
Wow. And I mean, for you, having worked in development, and having like, some might question saying like you had quite a superficial kind of view of things, you know, as you traveled through. But I mean, having done something like this, what are some of the ambitions, the things that you've got next on your radar, you know, kind of going from this? Because this is almost like a platform, you know, that you've created for yourself. What's the next steps for you?
One thing is that we are now back in London, which we weren't anticipating. When we left London, we thought it might be the end of our chapter here, but we've come back because of various opportunities that have come up. And London is an amazing place because it is so multicultural, and something that we've brought away from our trip is so many ways into conversations with people. Where are you from? Argentina. Let me tell you a story. And Steve, having been on his trip before, it's just an incredible way of building relationships with people who may feel isolated or have their own communities of people who are also from their country but not from outside. And also we love that. We love the cultures and continuing to learn from other people. So that's one thing. Another thing that's amazing is just seeing England with fresh eyes. I think being taken out of your context for a long time as well, travelling for nearly 9 months, and coming back and realising with all the ways that we're lucky, that I knew up here, but you don't necessarily feel it in here because life weighs you down. But to come back and think, God can use us in so many ways at home, and that is really true. It's not just something to make you feel better. And you don't need to go away to do it either. It's just the little things doing at home that are really important.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think, you know, from coming and you know, having worked at Tearfund and having been on this experience, I think it's fascinating when you take, you know, something, you know, that is so almost mind-bending, you know, what you've managed to achieve, you know, because the thing is, even like you say, going against, you know, a lot of people going, well, that's a crazy idea, you know, why would you even do that? I mean, people that are in the audience that are kind of watching on live stream that have that similar, you know, desire to just adventure and just, you know, almost break the status quo, you know, of what is, you know, they should be getting a mortgage for a house, or they should be doing this because that's what's responsible in what the, I guess, society is saying. What kind of encouragement would you give to those people out there?
I think it's really important to test your motives. So we had 2 years of saying, well, we think this is what God is calling us to do, but we believe that if it's not, then it won't happen. So I think being willing to be challenged. Another thing is, a member of my family wrote and said, is this the right thing as a Christian? Do you think that this is wise? And actually, yes, I did think it was, but it gave me the opportunity to explain that and also to be tested on it. The other thing is that the world tells us so many things that it doesn't really believe, but we hear. Which I mean is that it tells us not to take risks, that you should, as a young adult, have your career path and your house and so on. But life isn't black and white, and when you actually step out of that, you realise no one's really doing it anyway. It's just what we're told. And so we took a big risk. We felt sure that it was the right thing to an extent, but you never really know. And it's been amazing, but not perfect. You know, it was really hard at points. And there are times when I thought, no, it would be really nice just to be reading the paper on a Saturday morning, not standing cold on another
looking for another
road.
ride.
No, that's right. But if you've entered into that challenge and that is your choice, then you accept it and run with it. I think that's important to know, that there will be knocks, even if you think you've made the right decision. And perseverance is really key.
Wow, brilliant. Well, anybody in the audience that has a question, or anybody out there in the ether on the internet, any questions for Joe before we bid her farewell? Yes, Pete.
So you went to lots of different churches.
Yeah.
Lots of different countries. What did you learn about how church is done differently?
So for those that are online, just Peter was just asking about how, going from church to church on your journey, how did that impact you? What kind of things did you take away, from those experiences in different, Christianity experiences?
Yeah, it was incredible to go to a different church every Sunday for 9 months. It was more regular than I attend church in England, to be honest. There was a lot of Spanish, obviously, some Portuguese when we were in Brazil, a lot of Catholic churches.
Yeah.
One of the key things it taught me was about how I approached going to church, because we were only going once to each place generally.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to make snap judgments about a church. But I had to wrestle with myself of, no, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about what came across, how the preacher was doing it, or the worship band, whether they were in tune. What is church for?
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting journey.
Yeah.
But then it was outside of church. On the Sunday, we met so many Christians. Often the people who pulled over to pick us up turned out to be these amazing Christian people.
Wow.
And that was just wonderful that God used it in that way, that we were really encouraged, because people would tell us they would then be praying for us, and we could pray with them, and how God just intervened in the week as well. And also I think it taught me about discernment, because there were some churches we went to that really were a challenge and they didn't feel right. And I couldn't necessarily put my finger on it, but it was more than just I didn't like the way they were singing, So I think it helped refine my own understanding of how you see God in church and in Christians.
Wow, great. Anybody else? Any other questions for Joe before we bid her farewell? Awesome. We can grab her while you have a coffee afterwards. But Joe, thank you so much for taking the time out for us. So, kind of a round of applause for Joe. Guys, so we're going to finish off with just having another person that actually is still working at Tearfund. Her name's Jo Herbert. We've got a really cool, Joe, if you could come and join us just for a moment. She's snuck in for the second part, which is great to have her here. But Jo, there's obviously some actions that people have been speaking about of living kind of simply and doing all these things, but we've got something obviously at Tearfund in that of rhythms, that you're a part of the youth and emerging generation at Tearfund. What I think for people that are wanting to engage more in a community around trying to live differently here in the UK, what kind of advice would you give to those that are here and online?
Well, to be honest, Tom said it as well as I could have.
Yeah. He's very eloquent.
Absolutely. And just like for me, you nailed it. I guess, so I similarly had an experience where I went overseas when I was younger, and I came back with this question. I'd seen poverty in a way that I'd never seen it before and had never understood it. And I came back asking, if I am a citizen of one of the richest nations in the world, there must be something I can do.
Yeah.
What can I do? What can I do? And I came back with this burning inside me.
Yeah.
And for about 2 months, kept coming to God, like, what do I do? There must be something I can do. I'm in a privileged position. What do I do?
Yeah.
I've seen this. And after that 2 months, God gave me the verse, Proverbs 31, 8 to 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Defend the rights of the needy and the poor. And God said to me, there's your answer.
Yeah.
I said, well, that's not an answer. How do I use my voice? I am one of 60 million people in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's all well and good you telling me to speak up, God, but how do I do that? And I guess the journey for me over the last, that was 10 years ago now, has been, how do I use my voice? How do I make a difference? And I have come to understand it is in the everyday small rhythms of my life. And what Tom was talking about in terms of consumerism is huge. Our modern economy, like so today's global economy is all based on modern day slavery.
Yeah.
So everything that you buy, anything that you come into contact can be traced back to slavery.
Yeah.
So that makes me really think about, what do I buy? What do I use on a daily basis? This is all things Tom said. What do I eat? Where does that come from? Has that exploited people?
Yeah.
Has that exploited the planet? And in that process, I'm utterly dishonouring God. And so, what are the rhythms of my life? So, what am I eating regularly? What am I buying regularly? What am I spending my money on? What am I giving to regularly? How much how big is my carbon footprint, if you like, on this earth? What am I doing really regularly? And so rhythms really is about that. It's about saying, what are the small everyday rhythms of your life? And we'll take one at a time, bit by bit, and begin to change them so that they begin to benefit people living in poverty, so that they honour God. And again, brilliantly, as Tom said, it changes me. As I think about what I consume, it requires me to think about my life and how my everyday life honours God. And if you read Romans 12 verse 1 and 2 in the Message version, it talks about how do we bring our everyday walking around ordinary lives and bring it before God as an offering. And so rhythms really is about that. So there's a website, there's an app you can download, there's loads of different actions, just ideas. So lots of people say to me, yeah, but Jo, how do I make a difference? So there's loads of different things, practical stuff that you can do. So starting maybe with things like buying fair trade, not using so many paper cups maybe, thinking just how am I getting to work or school or uni or whatever? Is there a more eco way of getting there? Can I walk? Can I cycle? Can I take public transport rather than drive? Can I eat less meat? That's a whole area that we're beginning to talk about. Those sorts of things. There's loads of stuff on there that you can sign up and get informed about.
Wow. Well, thank you, Jo, for being here and being able to just give us a practical tool, to help us sort of better serve God and the communities that we live in. Because as we come back from our time overseas, it's quite easy just to kind of package that experience and go, well, that happened, now let me get on with the rest of my life. But I think it's amazing when we actually allow that experience to really catapult us into something different, a life that just is different, and people see it and people recognize it. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for those that have shared their stories. Esther, Tom, Peter, Jo, thank you so much for just spending the time just telling stories, because stories are so significant, because I really believe we're all living significant stories. And it's just to hear other people share, just their everyday story, but how they're having an impact and making an impact in just the everyday. I think that's powerful, and I think we want to do more of these. So please, if you haven't managed to, if you just joined us right at the end, or you've got other friends that would really enjoy this, it's really about creating a community of just storytelling, because we think stories are powerful and stories need to be shared. So thank you so much. Thank you for Rich, who's been our technical guru at the back there. Round of applause to Rich. Thank you to Pete, who's been doing some baristering for us. Absolute legend. Thank you so much, buddy. But yeah, again, thank you to everybody that's come down, to make this night possible, and to really just experiment with story. I think that's the exciting thing. So please join us next time when we speak about Tearfund story sessions. Get your friends, to get involved. But we'll see you next time, everybody. Catch you later. Done and dusted. Thanks. suntan.